Hello, and welcome to another episode of Ask Adam Live. Ask, as you know, or maybe not, is the acronym for Always Seek Knowledge. As I hope with this and each and every episode, it asks of you to seek your own knowledge. I share, but I want you to dive in a little bit deeper with your personal life, with your personal mentor, to understand a little bit more about yourself, a little bit more about life, and a little bit more about others. I think if we all do this, we certainly can create something pretty magical. First of all, that we would understand ourselves. In turn, we would understand others. And, well, quite frankly, we'd work together. Understanding how things work, understanding ourselves and others, well, to me, that just makes the perfect triangle. And that is the show, Ask Adam Live. So thanks for joining us, and let's get into it. Offer alchemy. Turn skills into products. Let's get started. Turning skills into products. Your experience has value, but value only grows when it's packaged, positioned, and offered. In this episode, which naturally fits within the Ask Adam Live coaching style, strategic, practical, and rooted in live experiences in, well, the span of my 4 careers, which I feel covers multiple industries. I speak from experience. And in this episode, well, like some others, I'm going to share that experience with you in hopes that, well, you've learned a little bit of something about yourself and about others. You know, for years I had skills: real estate, insurance, supply chain, operations, and speaking. But skills alone don't create the income streams. That's just, skills are just the raw material. Products are the refinery. That's truly what creates the income, is selling something tangible, providing someone with something that is recognizable, that's usable, that's effective. See, many professionals, well, they sit on decades of knowledge, yet never monetize it because, well, they think, who would pay for this? Everyone already knows this. Or even with all those years of experience, they claim they're not an expert yet. That is one of the same internal barriers that steals dreams. It's rooted in hesitation. Its growth, its growth comes from fear of failure and a sprinkle of self-doubt. And well, quite frankly, that just prevents action. Let me ask you, what knowledge do you have that someone, say 10 years behind you, would gladly pay to learn? Let me restate that. What knowledge might you have in your experience that someone 10 years behind you, just starting out, would gladly pay you to shorten their learning curve? Well, that's the exact question that frames this particular episode. See, skills are raw material. Most people misunderstand value creation. They think if you have skills, well, that's going to make money. But the real formula truly is skills with framework creates a product that gives you revenue. See, your knowledge becomes valuable when it's organized and transferable. I remember I was speaking with a real estate agent back in my real estate time, and they were 40 years in the industry, getting ready to retire, and they touted their book of business. I mean, it was a binder just full of pages and pages and pages. On those pages was lists of their clients, spreadsheets, if you will, on hard copy of just lists of clients and when they bought and when they sold and some specific notes and all this stuff. And that was their book of business. And that was, when things slowed down, they'd start at the beginning and start making calls. Hey, and just catch up and put little sketch notes on the paper about maybe somebody being born or somebody graduating in a couple years, and they would flag that page and call them in a few years and, hey, I want to congratulate you. I understand you graduated college. You must be looking to start a family, and would you consider, were you looking to maybe put that family home, and how can I help? And I mean, this was their book of business, and imagine it was pretty sizable after 40 years. And I remember there was two questions I asked them. The main one, which is pretty relevant to this particular episode, was, that's great. You have a book of business and you're going to give that book to somebody. You're assuming you can sell that book and somebody's going to give you umpteen bananas for this book of contacts. That's great if you can get somebody to give you umpteen bananas for these contacts. But that, first of all, has to be somebody that knows how to even use that. Somebody who's even interested in flipping through pages, where with the evolution of even technology at that point, was starting to utilize spreadsheets and digital platforms and applications and things of those nature. So getting away from paper was kind of becoming the norm. And they said, well, this is worth a lot of money. I said, to who? Somebody, first of all, has to know how to use a book like you've set up and to utilize it for it to be valuable as far as creating business and a stream of business. So now the challenge, which kind of goes into this episode, is you have to now provide somebody education on how to use this book that you've created. So although it was organized, it wasn't transferable. See the difference? The other thing that I kind of questioned that 40-year agent was that they were just going to up and retire. And I congratulated them and I said, well, that's good. I said, but you have all this knowledge. Wouldn't you want to pass that on to somebody? And they just looked at me and said, now, why would I want to do that? I said, well, because there's a whole generation of not only people 10 years behind you. Now, again, 40 years in the industry. So they were probably about six, maybe almost 70 years old, right? From the time they started at a very young age through the real estate industry. So there's a lot of experience there that's relevant, because in those transactions, they're all the same. The addresses change and the names change, but man, the experiences are all the same. They occur sometimes more often than others, but they still occur, just with different people for a different property. Anyway, I said, well, why wouldn't you want to share that knowledge? Why wouldn't you want to be like an office mentor, even if you showed up once a week on some free time just to coach the office on a trait or a skill or something? No, I'm just not interested. I said, on a business or an industry that basically took care of you for 40 years, fed you and your family, generations, your grandkids, took care of everything you ever wanted. You don't want to give anything back? No, I'm good, they said. Now, I don't want to embarrass this person. Quite frankly, I can't remember their name, but their behavior was pretty profound. Why they wouldn't want to share something, even a little bit, even some breadcrumbs to leave behind for the next generation. I was even speaking at that time of just giving it away. Certainly they could have monetized it, even to the minute level of having an office buy you some lunch, or maybe even give you a corner office that you could hang out and be the office mentor. Kind of give you a reason to get up every day. I guess some people just don't see the world like I do. Maybe that's part of what inspired me to coach people, train people, and teach people that there's a second part of the story, and you're still in it. So some people might know how to close sales. Maybe you have a diamond ring of the diamond of salesmanship, top of the field, have sold many different things in your life. You have information you could share. Maybe you've built a team. Maybe you're one of those people that can get people together, rally them for a cause in an office, and build up the admin and the marketer and the buyer's agent, the seller's agent. Maybe you're a developer and you create things, and maybe you have software teams that are creating and coding and putting things together. And maybe you just have that skill of getting people together for that cause. Well, that team building, that's pretty important. Maybe you're pretty good at starting businesses. You like that ground up atmosphere where you take nothing and create something. Not much in keeping it going, but you like the startup aspect of it. I'm sure you've got tons of experience you could share with others. Maybe you've recovered, like myself, from burnout, and you've got something to share. How you recovered. Maybe even how you got exhausted, and some of the things you can avoid from the beginning. Maybe you were that shy person in the back of the networking room that all of a sudden developed an enormous amount of confidence through trial and error. But until you can take all of that knowledge and build it together into a method, into a teachable method, quite frankly, it stays invisible. And you're the best in your field, and it stops there. Quite frankly, the buck stops there. And the next person won't ever see that buck. See, this aligns with the modeling principle that I use in coaching as well as in neuroscience. And it creates successful outcomes, I've found, because it comes from the understanding, the beliefs, behaviors, and the sequence of actions that actually are what produces results. See, when you model your own progress, you actually are creating teachable intellectual property. Part 2 in the Offer Alchemy formula. This introduces framework that listeners can apply. You can do this. Audit your experience. Just write down 20 things. Take a piece of paper, get a pen, pause the episode for a moment, and write down 20 things that you have done in your life. I'm sure you can come up with 20. 10's easy, 20 is a little harder, but come up with 10 things that you've done strategically in your life. And one thing can turn into another. So, that's where I think 20 is easy. When maybe you were a manager in something and all of a sudden you became a developer or a director of something. Well, that's another level. So to me, that is therefore something else. You can add director skills to this list. So write that down, and I'll wait. Okay, did you get the list of 20 put together? Terrific. Now you can audit your experiences and look at what problems have you solved repeatedly. What questions did people most commonly ask you in your field? And I'm sure this is a pretty easy one, is what mistakes have you already paid for? I mean, we've all written checks for mistakes. Preferably only one check per mistake, but some of us are slow learners. Your experience was actually a laboratory that, well, you paid for. And questions that you've developed answers for. And problems that you solve repeatedly. So that's A, audit your experience. L, locate the pain. See, people don't buy information. They buy relief from the friction. So, for example, maybe somebody suffered from overwhelm, right? And that's something that you could share with them. Maybe you worked through that phase of stagnant income. How about some of those leadership struggles, right? Where you were hanging out in middle management and just couldn't break the barrier, but you eventually did. What did you learn? And what was it? What was the skill that you acquired or began to adopt in your daily that catapulted you to the next level? Now, I might be speaking out of turn, and maybe this might resonate with some of you. I know on my fourth career, I'm a pretty good candidate to say career confusion. That you got about halfway through something and put a lot of time into it to realize, this isn't for me. I don't like this. Not that you didn't enjoy what you were doing, it just wasn't something that was you anymore. You kind of outgrew it. And you got a little confused and you tried something else. And then you felt like that wasn't it. So you tried something else. I'm laughing because I'd been there. One thing I don't have is a fear of speaking, but I know others do. And how did you get over that? Maybe you can share with someone how you did just that. But if there's a problem and there's enough pain, you locate the pain. Then you provide a solution. The solution is what sells. That's what everybody wants, is the solution. Look at all the diet plans in the world. What's the one thing they can say? Lose weight. It loses weight. You lose weight. Fat falls off, you lose weight. Because the solution sells. They're already telling you here's what it's going to do. Whether it does it or not doesn't matter. It's the fact that it claims it can, and you therefore are already interested. So you're already buying it. Continuing in the world of acronyms, C is to create a process. Turn your knowledge into steps. For example, instead of being confident, let me share with you that you want to identify your internal beliefs and get those aligned. To reframe your story, not where you've been, but where you're going. And then to begin to anchor some new behavioral habits I've shared in other episodes, and I probably could get into them here. But as you walk into a room and you stand with confidence, even though you don't quite feel like you have it, put your shoulders back, open your arms, and walk into any room. I guarantee you will feel confident just by that action. And that small habit can create the small ripple in that pond. Remember, shoulders back, not arms to your side, not slouched over, shoulders back, open, like you made the room, Go in with arms open. I am most certain you will not only gain attention, someone will come up to be interested in you. That is your time to shine. But it's confidence. through new behavior. When you begin to mirror this behavior and start to create a presentation with framework that is honed in on transforming someone from their problem to a solution, there you have it. That is the test in action right there. Structured steps mirrored in presentation frameworks will guide the transformation from problem to solution. H is the host of transformation. The product that you're offering must have movement, right? It's got to deliver some level of action. It can't just be an idea. So maybe in these trainings, you might have a workshop. Maybe you put together a multi-level course that goes on for a couple of weeks. So it gives you time to teach each one of these long-term tools that you've developed and created. I mean, if you've got 30 years in a business, you certainly have a 7-week course. It just getting into the nuts and bolts of the details of some of those experiences that you can share with someone who's just starting in the business. Maybe you're just focused on a coaching program where you're just doing it one-on-one with someone and just specifically one person at a time. Maybe you write a book about your experience. Several people have done that, have written books about their experience, and your experience, believe it or not, is different than someone else's experience. And the stories that you can share, although you might be telling yourself through the Toxic 10 that somebody's already done it, but I guarantee you nobody has stories like you. And this is a way to share your experience and to monetize your knowledge. Maybe you go through those extra steps of creating a level of certification that's recognized by a certain field. You know, I know many industries like insurance and real estate, doctors and lawyers, they have to take certification courses in order to maintain licensure. Maybe that's something you could incorporate your knowledge into that accredited certification so that you can offer a class. Maybe you start at your state on the local level and get certified with a state. And then that recognition turns into a national level where now you're traveling and nationally giving this certification to more people. See how this expands? Or maybe you're just simply creating a small toolkit of the ins and outs of what you've done. That, you know, some of the most common problems or things you want to avoid. What are the 10 most problematic clients that you've dealt with? What are the, well, similar to my Toxic 10 is, what are the most common things that 10 clients would complain about? So you already know how to combat those, how to find the 10 best clients. If you're in sales or doctors, lawyers, how to specialize in something. See, it's the transformation is what your client is going to purchase, is taking them from this level to maybe this level, taking them steps above. I remember in real estate, many times the courses that got peddled out, it was about $1,000 for 6 or 7 weeks of somebody to tell you how they did it. And you'd go once a week for 7 weeks, or sometimes every other week for 2 months, 3 months. And they were basically stating to you that they could take you from basic level to a higher level, to the expert level, through some of the skills and things that they did. Many of them were kind of common sense, and you're like, well, why didn't I think of that? But you weren't thinking about that, and they shared that information. Now, was it valuable to you? Because you paid probably $1,000 to $1,200 at the time, and it gave you, I don't know, 120,000 in business. I think that was kind of worth it over the years of utilizing those tools. But that is what someone is going to buy, is that transformation. That's kind of the selling point. That's the host of transformation. Next, you want to expand the offer. That's E. Because once the framework works, now you can scale it like a ladder. Starts out with content, maybe the workshop, then a course, and the coaching program, maybe corporate training, maybe even to public speaking. This is how knowledge becomes an ecosystem that you created. And it's steps that you can scale up quickly or slowly. I mean, the speed is up to you. Part 3. Here's product types that scale. Here's the 5 common products that knowledge entrepreneurs have created. Workshops, they're short and they're practical. Courses, like I said, structured learning, modules, worksheets, exercises. You can do it on a 1-week program, 3-day program, a retreat, several weeks, 7-8 week program. Then there's the specific coaching programs, which is high touch transformation. And that's kind of where your client's basically paying more for accountability. Somebody to say, hey, how come you didn't do this? Or here's what to do next. Here's what to do next. How come you didn't do the last step? Now you need to do the next step and the last step. They're basically paying for someone to be accountable. Quite frankly, that could be a colleague or a good friend that you entrust. Say, hey, be honest with me. Remind me what it is that I'm doing and what I want. Usually a go-to for people who step into that retirement realm when they're actually outside of the business. You know, they got a lot more free time on their hands. So they create a book and become the authority builders. And quite frankly, books, well, they create credibility, quite frankly, more than income. But nonetheless, you get a book. Now you got something that represents you and your hard work and something you can reference. Maybe you're taking that knowledge to the convention level where you become a keynote speaker for that industry. Now that gets you some leverage, right? Because, I mean, one speech can kind of cover one retirement payment, if not many. So share that experience with the peers, with people that are just starting out. And part 4. This is some of the mistakes that many of the experts make. They try to sell their information. Remember, like the example, oh, here, I have a list of contacts. People know how to contact people. Well, no, they don't. Not the way you did. And quite frankly, if I contacted Bob and Sally Smith, they're not going to know me from Adam, pardon the pun. And if I call them up to say, hey, who do they know? They're going to say, well, we talked to blank. So your book of business is not my book of business, and it's certainly not anybody I've worked with. So they're going to talk to me like I'm a stranger and treat me like a stranger. See, the transformation happens through stories and through exercises and through the emotional connection. Remember the pain, as well as through repeated action. See, the brain retains more when we experience the reinforced lesson of praise, repetition, and emotional engagement. This is what strengthens our learning pathways. That's why great teaching, honestly, is not tantamount to colleges where they just lecture. It's offering that guided experience, a little hand-holding, if you will. That's what's going to transform those people who are coming up to become just like you, and a multiplier. So now you can create an army, if you will, of a sales force like you were, as an expert as you were, as an engineer like you were. So part 5 is stepping into this simple exercise. We're going to write 3 lists, okay? The first list is your skills. What can you do well? What is your mastery? That's our first list. Our second list is your struggles. What did you overcome in your experience? And then your third list, probably a little bit more wordy, is your lessons. What do most people ask you about? And where those 3 lists intersect, well, that creates your offer seed. You specifically creates your seed of what you're going to replicate in your training and experience. So let me repeat. 3 lists. First, your skills, what you've done well, what you've excelled at. The second one was your struggles. What are the multiple things that throughout your career you overcame? And then the third list is, what are your lessons? What are the things that you learned? Maybe even some of the things that people asked you about, that you found out about, that you learned about, that you experienced. Your lessons, how they created the you that is now. And when you can connect the dots to those 3 lists, well, now you've created your seed. The seed to write a book, the seed to put together a workshop, and go from there. Sharing your experience, true to you and only you. Recognizing that seed is going to grow a tree to create the shade of those experiencing the pain from the sun. That is how you convert what you've learned and what you know into something that can become viable. And I truly believe that the more we turn around and look back at those behind us and share with us the valuable information that we've learned in business and in life, I think that creates a better society. And each time we replicate that, improves society. See, your experience isn't random. Every mistake, every challenge, every reinvention created insight. And quite frankly, someone else needs that insight. Bring it back to purpose. And the truth is just simply skills create capability, systems create value, and products create freedom. The moment you organize your experience into a framework, you move from working for income to building an impact. Your knowledge is not just part of your past, it may be the blueprint for someone else's future. This has been another thought provoking episode of Ask Adam Live. Now let us all get our lists together, plant that seed, and together make it a great day.